Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're here broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan is at the controls in Minnesota. He's engineering the broadcast today. I'm Vincent Finelli. Captain John Regan's with us. Welcome, Captain John Regan.
Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning, John Regan. Hey, John, I wanted to share a story with you, if I might. So, I needed to get a serpentine belt for our old Mercedes, the 1996. And the reason I needed to get it was the new one that I put on, as preventative maintenance, I didn't want to get stuck. And the original one that the vehicle came with had some cracks in it and had some little tears in it. And it would probably go for maybe another 5,000 miles. But I thought, I'll put that one in the trunk and I'll get a new one, put a new one on. Put this new one on and it squealed. It squealed and it seemed like the back of it was turning from the rubber part of the belt into this goo. And it was kind of bothering me because as you accelerated the engine, it would squeal like you were burning out. And it was the belt. So to make a long story short, I went to, I was traveling with Mrs. Finelli picking up some more equipment. And I passed one of these chain store auto parts places, same chain that I deal with locally. And so I went in and I said, I'd like to buy this belt. I have the part number. And I explained that to the salesperson, who was about my age. And he seemed experienced. And I said, by the way, I get 10% discount at the local store. Can you honor that? And he didn't know what to say. So he got the manager. And the manager was this young guy. And his name is Derek. So the manager came over and I explained to him that I get 10% discount just because I buy a lot of stuff at this other store, and would he honor that? And he told me he could not do that. Could not do that because he didn't know me. And I said, well, I know that. But okay. And then he explained that because he didn't know me, he didn't know if he could believe me. I said, okay. I'm not going to buy the belt. I started to walk out of the store, and it was like, the question was it because of the 10%? And I said, no, it's not because of the 10%. It's because you don't believe me. And why should I shop here if you don't believe me? And by the way, I'm never coming back. Ever. Never. Didn't raise my voice at all and explained to him that I would not be coming back. And then he thought about it for a second. He said, I'll tell you what, he wanted to earn my business. And he said he would give me 20% off. And I think he realized that I was telling him the truth. And I explained to him that, there are people who tell the truth. And, I said to him, before that, it's not that you can't give me the 10% off. It's because you won't give me the 10% off. That's what it is. It's not like there's some rule or regulation or something with the system that there's no 10% off capability. That's not it. It's you just don't want to do it. And he indicated that's correct. Well, we agreed that we would do the transaction. He gave me 20% off. And then I said, if you got a couple minutes, I want to tell you a few things. And I taught him about customer service. And I told him that when I was behind the counter, when I was a young man, a high school student working behind the independent auto parts store counter, customers would come in and if they said, my car is making this funny noise, I'm not really sure what it is. I'd say, well, let's go look. And I would go out, I would leave the counter if it wasn't really busy, and if there were other people behind the counter doing what I could do, I'd go out there and I'd listen to the car, and I'd say, okay, here's what the problem is. This is what's wrong, and here's what you need, and we have them, and I can help you with that. And that's what I used to do. And I told them that we had these little spark plug gappers that you put on a keychain. So they're a little round disc the size of a little smaller than a silver dollar. You put it on your keychain, and it would gap. It had a little gauge on it, and you could gap your spark plugs with it. And they were maybe 49 cents back then. And they were hanging on a rack right on the counter, so people could just pick one up if they were buying spark plugs. I said to many of the customers, people I thought would be good customers, who were good customers, or could be repeat customers, I would say, do you have one of these? And most of them would say no. And I'd say, okay, well, here, take this. It's on me. And I would give it to them. And the combination of paying attention to them, knowing the product lines, showing them good, better, or best price points, helping them with diagnostics with their vehicles, and giving them little things that they could use, like this lifetime tool that they could use for gapping their spark plugs. It still works today. The one I bought, I still have in my toolbox from the early 1970s. And our sales went up 25%. The store couldn't believe it. They didn't know what happened. And it was really simple. It was just taking care of customers, welcoming them with a smile. Anyway, so I spent some extra time telling Derek these stories. And when we were all done, he was really appreciative, because no customer had told him how he could do his job better and how he could improve, because he was the new young manager of the store. He was the guy that was supposed to make it work, but he had the wrong attitude in the beginning. And I think that's fixed. I think as of when I left, I think they had a whole change in attitude of how they're going to treat their customers. John, do you have a reaction to that?
It's amazing to me, seeing, because especially having to the move last summer, having to find new locations to do business with. Mm-hmm. And it's some ways, like you describe it, it's almost a cluelessness about, how do you work with customers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, young people that for some reason they get hired, and I'm sure they go through some kind of an evaluation or a test, or a combination of both, and the interview process as well. And the interviewing person says, "Well, great, you're hired. And what about the training? Where's the training on how to work with customers?" I'm sure they get trained on how to work with that cash register, because it's complex. I'm sure they get trained on how to work with warranties. But the pleasantries, the niceties, I have a feeling that they are not really trained in that part of the business to the level that it would be nice to be trained in. Now, I know that I was. Not when I was at the auto parts store, but when I was at the bank, one of the banks where I worked, they trained everybody for an entire week on what their expectations were, how to work with customers, that customers were not an interruption in the business. They were the reason for the business, and that the customer comes first. The customer is right, and it's your job to help the customer every way you can. That's moral and legal. That was what we were taught to do. And to put a smile in our voice, a bounce in our step, go above and beyond all the time. That's what we were taught to do. And that's how I measure everything when I'm transacting in business. And cops could learn a lot from this. They don't have to say license and registration, because I got a gun. They could be a lot more pleasant. They could say, "Hey, you having a good day? Good. The reason I pulled you over was I saw this. Do you know your muffler's hanging down? And it probably might fall off, in the not too distant future. Probably good to take a look at it. There are a couple places up the road here. There's a couple garages. If you want to pull over and look at it yourself, there's a safe spot up ahead. I can take you there and make sure you get off the road and, where it's safe for you to look at it." I mean, they could do those kinds of things. They could just change their tone a little bit rather than be so rough on us. I'm not talking about all of them. I'm talking about almost all of them. Okay, John, I'm at thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, and let's see, you've got an event coming up, right?
Yes, I do. Very quickly. Hear the Watchman. It's going to be in Dallas again, March 31st to April 2nd. I could use another 6 months between now and then, but that's the way it goes. A bunch of wonderful speakers, and you're actually going to get to hear some of those very soon on USA Prepares.
Isn't that great? I'm looking forward to it. So we're going to have like a preview of Hear the Watchman conference right here on usaprepares.com. And more will be coming up in the next couple of days. You'll get a chance to hear about that. So, John, I'm at the financialstateoftheunion.com. Oh, did you have anything you want to share with us before we get into today's lessons?
I'm going to, I guess, apologize again. I've been so behind on time. I normally have news items that we don't get to in the post. Well, for the third week in a row, I don't have those extra news items. And if you're familiar with the post, there's a lot of stuff in those that are important items that we never get to on air. And I'm going to try and get some of those up this week if I can.
Okay, so when we come back, are we going to talk about the wage gap?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Captain John Regan's with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. This is USA Prepares. We'll be right back. Thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. Click on the news tab and you can follow along in class with us. Captain John Regan's with us. John?
Well, don't try to educate your leftist friends with this, because I don't think they can be educated. And this continually comes out that there's this big wage gap, that a woman only earns 79% of what men earn, or 79 cents for every dollar. And what this article does is it leads you through how you come up with statistics like that. And if you want to try to compare apples to apples, when a woman does the same job as a man, that pay is, equal or pretty darn close. But that's not the way things are working in real life. Women tend to work fewer hours. A woman, for example, is 2.5 times more likely than a man to work just 35 to 39 hours per week, and men are almost twice as likely to put in more than 40 hours a week, and 2.5 times more likely to work over 60 hours a week. So, naturally, the number of hours you work does tend to affect the amount of pay that you get. And then it's kind of, segregated in a way, and, we could debate on that for a while, but men and women tend to do different types of work. And working as a, wait staff versus working as an engineer, you tend to have different pay rates. So, it's definitely harder work, going and getting a degree that means something. And then even if you do that with today's environment, it's hard enough to get a job anyway. But, just if you want to, have a counter ready, not that it does much good to try to get people up to speed in these things. This article's for you.
I've worked with both men and women, and what I've seen, and kind of bears out what you've said. The women who have had vice presidential jobs made more than those who were not as highly ranked in the bank. But most of the people, most of the women did not have the jobs that required the overtime that you're talking about. And when I'm talking about overtime, I'm not talking about where you punch a clock and then, more than 40 hours. I'm talking about those jobs that are supposed to be 35 hours a week where you end up working 45, 50 hours a week, in management. And I believe that's a lot of what you're talking about. Is that correct?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like when I was in the Air Force, it didn't matter if you were male or female. It mattered, what was your rank and how many years do you have in. And there was very little you could do to change that except wait for promotion.
Mm-hmm.
There's exceptions like, hazardous duty pay, things of that nature, but typically you don't get to choose those either. So talking about equal pay for equal work, the military is there. But when you get out, in the civilian sector, whereas in the military, you might be working one of those positions that wouldn't get paid as much in the civilian world. You're getting paid the same as everybody else. Or if you're in one of those positions like computers where you might be able to pull down above six-figure salary, you're not going to get that. You're drugged down to what everybody else is getting. So it's just a matter of I guess you'd say the market.
And there's the raising of children, and in many cases, the women who have children, young children at home, need to meet them, pretty soon after they got off the bus. And the women have other responsibilities that continue on until bedtime, which is like taking care of the house, cooking, cleaning, and those kinds of things. So it's not like women work lighter duty. They work different duty with different hours at different locations. Like Captain John Regan, what's next?
Well, about that global warming agenda, and one of the articles I didn't post today gets into the data, but this talks about the push behind the scenes. And I've got a couple of quotes from the UN's, from the Executive Secretary of the UN's Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is the first time in the history of mankind that we are setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, to change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution. And if you think that she is just being misquoted there, she goes on, this is probably the most difficult task we have ever given ourselves, which is to intentionally transform the economic development model for the first time in human history. And it gets down to what a lot of us know about the UN. It's not here to save the world from ecological calamity, but to destroy capitalism.
Yeah. I'm looking at the article right now, Zero Hedge. UN official admits global warming agenda is really about destroying capitalism.
And this
what
is
else
a
do we know
long
about
time
it, John?
agenda. It's the same old communist manifesto. Yeah. And again, don't try to confuse the leftists with any facts. It's they're going to believe what they want to believe. And speaking of crazy, coming to America, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. This is one of those types of articles I look for, because when you see something going on in the UK or Canada or Australia, that's where they pull these things first before they bring them to the United States. And in the UK, they are looking to require auto insurance for other types of vehicles. And this goes from race cars, which are never on public street, to wheelchairs. And if you think that's bad, and this is really serious, because there's a penalty for having an uninsured vehicle. It's 300 pounds, which is about $375, and you get 6 penalty points. And the UK is a little upset because this is really mandated by the EU. And I'm trying to get down here to the list. Besides that, it's pretty much everything. It could be if you have a car up on blocks, it doesn't matter. If it's not going anywhere, you have to have the insurance. Farm tractors. We already talked about motorized wheelchairs, riding lawnmowers, golf carts, even bumper cars need to have car insurance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why just riding lawnmowers? Why not include the kind that are self-propelled that you walk behind? Why not include them? And what about weed whackers, and hedge trimmers? John, what we're talking about is like the Obamacare concept, the abomination concept, the Affordable Care Act, the failure. We're talking about applying that kind of logic to other things with gasoline-powered engines, right? And how can we make people buy things with the threat of a gun pointed to their head, right? Another way of taxing, right? Isn't that what this is all about? But instead of a tax per se, you're being forced to buy insurance that nobody in their right mind would buy. Now, I could buy insurance for my tractor, and this would be not insurance that should the engine need repair or the transmission or something like that. No, and it's not towing insurance. No, it would be insurance against theft. Should someone decide that they like my tractor as much as I do and want to go into the barn and steal it, it would be insurance for that. But I don't necessarily want to do that. I've got my tractors kept where I can insure them myself and make sure that they don't get stolen. But forcing people to buy insurance is over the top. Absolutely over the top. How come we haven't forced people to buy dental insurance, John? How come? We've forced them to buy medical insurance.
And the sad thing is, it's not even insurance. Insurance is supposed to be there for unlikely events, not to try to be some kind of prepaid plan,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This bothers me. It's just one more indication of government overreach, and hopefully President Donald Trump will look at this and say, "You guys have lost your mind. Don't even think about it."
Speaking of mind,
if someone if someone runs over me with a golf cart or a Segway or a riding lawnmower, we'll take the appropriate action individually, and I think that the rest of this broadcast classroom would do the same thing. Okay, what's next?
Moving on down to brain cleaning. One of the reasons that we need to sleep is it wipes our brains clear because, we accumulate a lot of things during the day, and it helps to reset our brains to make room for new memories. And that's one of the reasons. There's also been studies where there's other health issues involved too. I remember where they took a bunch of healthy college students and they ran all kinds of tests on them before running the study. And they put them into a sleep-deprived mode, and within 2 weeks they were already pre-diabetic. So I know we have so many pressures in today's modern world to, short our sleep to try and get more done, but there's plenty of evidence that it's counterproductive for mental and physical reasons. Now, there are some people, and Trump is one of those, that, was lucky enough in his DNA that he can get by on about 4 hours of sleep a night. But if you're not one of those people, you need to make sure that you're getting adequate rest. And in addition to that, it's also shown up in reaction times. If you're sleep deprived, it's just as bad as driving under the influence of alcohol.
That's absolutely true. And Dr. Norman Shealy has talked about the importance of sleep. 7 or 8 hours. He said it's absolutely required. If you want to be healthy and you want to be disease resistant, you absolutely have to have it. It's not the only thing you have to do, but you got to do that too.
And I've got another reason not to get married. And it's like, really, I saw this headline. A wedding now costs $35,000. It's absolutely insane. There's so much you could do with that kind of money. I mean, that's a car without a car payment. That's a hefty down payment on the house. And when you look at how the costs break down on the national average, people are spending over $16,000 just for the venue.
That's crazy, absolutely crazy. Those are the kind of numbers that it takes to put on a convention for an entire weekend at a huge venue. I'm talking over 40,000 square feet. John, according to this post, it says it's revealed that the cost per wedding guest is up to $245 a piece, as compared with $194 in 2009. So you invite someone, it's like $250 per guest. I've encouraged our children to, if they want to get married, we'll have it right here in the backyard at the farm. I mean, seriously, or just elope and save the money. It's John, it's absolutely out of control. And who's it for? So the break-even point, let's say you were going to bring a gift. Let's say you and Becky were invited to a wedding, and you were going to bring a gift. To break even, it'd be $245 for each of you as the money spent on that gift. Almost $500 in gifts from one couple attending a wedding, if it were considered to be a break-even proposition. That's nuts. Absolutely nuts. It's nuts every way you look at it.
And the bottom line, too, that cost does not include the honeymoon.
Captain John Regan's with us. John, I was thinking about the wedding, the cost of the wedding. And when Mrs. Finelli and I were going to get married back in the 1970s, I asked her if she would rather have an engagement ring or a house with one more room. And that's really what it was. The cost of an engagement ring was equivalent to a house with one more bedroom, for example. And she looked at me like, well, that's easy. One more bedroom or one more room. And that's what we did. We got a house with one more room. And what we didn't do, John, was we didn't have a honeymoon. No honeymoon. And so by scrimping and saving and not falling into the same traps as many people have fallen into, we were able to have less debt. And that a diamond is a girl's best friend thing, what a crock that is. Diamond, they're way overpriced. And if you want to find out for sure, go buy one and then try to sell it and see if you can get what you paid for it. It's impossible, right, John?
And given what we know, where 60% of people out there have $1,000 or less in savings, that would suggest that a lot of people, walking down the aisle are going into debt for this.
Well, I was looking at some of the numbers. It says in this post on dailymail.co.uk that you've got linked on your website, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, in the news tab. It says that on average, the bride's parents contribute 44% of the overall wedding budget. The bride's parents, 44%. The groom, the bride and groom, 42%. And it says that the groom's parents contribute 13%, and then 2% is others. So evidently, the traditional model where the bride's parents pay for the wedding, it looks like that's no longer holding up. And I can understand it. If you're talking about a wedding that the least expensive wedding location, according to this post, is Arkansas, $19,522 on average. John, that is take-home pay. That's after all taxes. That means to me that a person would have to earn at least twice that much, $40,000, in order to pay for a $20,000 wedding. That's in Arkansas. What a waste of money. What a tremendous waste of money. And I have a feeling that if we got a wedding invitation here at the house, fortunately, thank you so much, we don't get them. But if we did, I'd probably look at Mrs. Finelli and say, how do we get out of this? Because I really wouldn't want to go to one. I really wouldn't. I'm sorry to say that, but I like staying home. That means that, well, you have to have a nice suit, right? You can't go in my uniform, which is, nice blue jeans and a sports coat or a blazer and a tie and a white shirt. Nope. Combat boots. I'm sure that means a nice suit, nice dress, nice wedding gift, travel, hotel, food. Man, it's an expensive proposition for a wedding. I'd rather help the young couple with something else and not go. But that's just me. Hey, John, what's coming up after top of the hour news and commercial announcements?
I do want to get to, is this why Europe's gone nuts? And then we've got some spy tech, Fukushima update, and lots more.
Yeah, well, you hear the Fukushima update. Captain John Regan and I'll be right back. Please, don't touch that dial. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. Captain John Regan's with us. John, this is a great way to get Alzheimer's, get a head start on getting Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah, and there's been a lot in the media in American football about concussions, and they've made some changes in the game where if you suffer a concussion, you don't go back into play, and you have to stay out of the game until you are recovered, which can be a week or two. Well, shouldn't come to any surprise across the pond. What they call football, we call soccer. Heading a soccer ball can cause a concussion, and just like with American football, the violent collisions that happen in that game, players who head the ball are 3 times more likely to be concussed than others. And of course, the more concussions you have, the worse it is for your brain as you get older.
Yeah,
kind of makes you wonder, is that why Europe's the way it is?
Yeah. And I watch these young people in sports, and I just don't get it. And it's all about winning the game. And when the game's over, it's over, right? What has been accomplished? I mean, I think it's great to get exercise, but I don't think it's really desirable to have the other team inflict pain and injuries on me. I don't like that so much. It's like one step before war, right? And the coaches, the game is so important. We got to win. We got to beat those guys. I don't know. I don't get it. I think it's good to be competitive. I think it's good to be competitive in business, but that doesn't mean, running out on the field and charging head on, with all your might and all your strength and to crash into somebody. Talking about football. Soccer, boy, it makes no sense. Hitting the ball with your head. It's like the one thing that you can't live without, your head. Okay.
We've talked a lot on this show about vehicle to vehicle, the V2V standards that are coming, where every vehicle's talking to every other, and of course that's part of getting ready for the self-driving vehicles. But even before then, having the cars that are aware of the other vehicles around them, they can, do the braking, as you've seen in commercials, to avoid collisions, things like that. Well, just when you think it can't get worse, they now have V2X. That is vehicle to everything. So whether it's a construction zone or a red light, your car will be communicating with fixed objects, and of course that's even more data and another way of surveilling the traffic. And it might help out with the self-driving vehicles having these additional stations that let them know what's going on around them. But it also, again, is part of the technocracy of surveillance and control.
So we are talking about kind of like that device I saw near an overpass, a transmitting antenna that was grabbing some kind of data and relaying it someplace else. I saw that here in our neck of the woods in Missouri, well, near one of the cities. So we're talking about vehicles communicating with vehicles and vehicles communicating with other devices, and all this data is being stored. So, John, are we talking about, well, Mr. Regan, we know you were there because at that time on Tuesday afternoon, we know that was your vehicle. We've got the license plate scanned. We know your vehicle was there. We know your phone was there. We know that you were at the wheel because we've got your image on facial recognition. So we are 100% sure that you were there at that time. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, isn't it?
Oh, it gets even worse than that when you're talking about the control in a smart city. There's an article that I didn't get posted that a man was placed at the scene of a crime because of the pacemaker he wears.
Wow.
And, of course, most people have a cell phone with them, and I believe that it won't be too much longer before you pretty much have to do that to do your transactions. But we'll be getting to that in a few articles.
John, if they can determine who you are from the signals your pacemaker, or a person's pacemaker, I should say, transmits, then it seems to me that you can program a pacemaker remotely. It's like, well, let's turn it up just a little bit, or let's turn it down just a little bit, or let's check the battery, or you know what? Heck with the whole thing. Let's just turn it off. Wow. I don't like this so much. Had smartphones smart cameras, smart traffic lights in Springfield, Missouri. They disabled them because what was happening is people were so concerned about the red lights and getting a ticket that the instant they saw the yellow light, they'd slam on their brakes, because what they did was they shortened the yellow interval. And as soon as the light went yellow, if you were proceeding through the intersection, it was red. When you're in the intersection, the camera would take a picture of you running through a red light. How do I know? Well, it happened to someone who borrowed my vehicle, going through a red light. Person doesn't go through red lights, but he got a ticket in my vehicle. So I got the ticket because someone else was using my vehicle. And so what happened is there were so many more rear-end collisions because the instant the yellow light would come on, the person would slam on the brakes and not go through the intersection, and the person behind would crash into him. Just one more case of stupidity from our government. But, that guy that's in charge, I used to give out his phone number in Springfield, Missouri. The city manager, I used to give out his phone number and tell my listeners to give him a call, tell him he was fired. Got me fired. Greg Burris. Yeah, Greg Burris is his name. $200,000 a year is what they're paying to him to poison everybody who drinks the water in Springfield with fluoride. Okay, John, back to you.
The next one comes under the regulated to death category, deadly windows. And a police officer was trying to rescue somebody and found out it wasn't as easy as it used to be. And starting with all 2018 models, new vehicles must have side windows made of laminated glass, similar to what you currently have in windshields. And this is designed to reduce ejections during accidents and also make smash and grab burglaries more difficult. But the thing is, if you can't shatter that glass, it makes it more difficult to rescue a person inside the car. So making the car safer for you has also made it more deadly.
John, I told a story once or twice on the air. Dr. Howard Shane and I were traveling in separate vehicles. He and his wife in his, and Mrs. Finelli and I were in ours. And I was in an old 1980 Mercedes 300 SD diesel. And we were at a traffic light in Springfield, Missouri. And we heard this crash. It was dark and foggy, and someone crashed into a light stanchion with concrete pier underneath it. And the car was on fire. The airbag deployed. The driver was unconscious. And the cabin was filled with smoke. Couldn't really see in. And I took the jack out of the Mercedes, and I was trying to break the window because the doors were crushed. You couldn't open the doors very easily. At least I couldn't. And some others who tried couldn't get the doors open because the doors were crushed. And so I was hammering on the windshield with this jack, and the side windows, the windshield, the back window. I had a really tough time until I had never tried to do that before. I mean, why would I try to bash out a window? And I finally had to use a point of the jack, the sharpest part, to get the window to crack. It's not easy. It's not easy with old vehicles, let alone what we're probably going to see in 2018, right? Yep.
Right.
And how much more is that window, that side glass going to cost us? Wow. It's going to cost more. Surprise. Okay, Captain John Regan, what's next? What's coming up next?
Good news is we're going to see faster coffee service. The bad news
great.
is that you're not going to get that $15 minimum wage.
We'll be right back. Captain John Regan's with us. John, honestly, I don't think I've ever been in a hurry for a cup of coffee. Ever in my entire life. Over 60 years. I don't think I've ever said, I need a cup of coffee faster. What's this all about?
Well, apparently you haven't been in a Starbucks line on your way to work.
That's correct. I have never been in a Starbucks, period. I had a cup of coffee. Someone handed me one, so I couldn't say I've never had a cup of Starbucks coffee. But I did have a cup of the regular coffee, and it was nothing special to me. Absolutely nothing special. But I've never been in a Starbucks. Can't imagine going into one. Can't.
Well, in the robot revolution, there's a coffee shop in San Francisco that now can serve up a perfect cappuccino in less than a minute. This Mitsubishi robot arm can serve between 1 and 200 cups per hour. So, well, like I say, if you're one of those wanting that $15 minimum wage, you're just pushing for more of these types of machines that will come out and not only take your job, but do it better. There was a similar article of a robot arm in Japan that, flips pancakes. So all those nice restaurant jobs that kept the unemployment rate low, I think we're going to be watching those transfer over the next 2 or 3 years. to these non-complaining employees.
There's a gas station / convenience store called Sheetz, Sheetz. It's on the East Coast. And you can go in there and you can buy gas at the pump, swipe your card if you want, or you can pay with cash. But after the transaction, you can go in, and after you pump your gas, you can go have some food made, and they have a touch screen, and you just touch what you want. There's a picture of different menu items, and you touch that and pay for it, and you get it delivered. It's made for you, but not by a machine. It's made by a person, but it's automated. The order entry has been automated for a couple of years now, and I've never liked doing that. So I've only done it once when I was traveling, but I haven't done it since because I didn't like doing that. I didn't like touching a screen rather than talk to a person. Because I might say, well, what do you recommend? Do you recommend item number 7 or item number 9? Which do you think is better and why? Can't do that with the machine. And I like the human interaction. I don't like being removed from it. I prefer to go to someone at the conveyor belt, the checkout station, rather than the automated system, if I can. If the line is not prohibitive. John, you feel the same way, or am I on an island here?
Well, I've done some complaints lately to the grocery store that I have been frequenting because they've just gone in and replaced all of the self-service kiosks with more modern machines. Unfortunately, they are designed for the millennials that only buy, a few items, and not somebody that's, buying a week's worth of grocery for a couple of people. And it's tough because I prefer to go and use the self-service kiosk because I want to look at the price that scans up. And after
Good
waiting
point.
in line for the checkers, they scan things so quickly, I can't follow along. And then at the end, I want to make sure that all of my coupons, which I've got digitally connected to my account, are accounted for because you want to take care of that before you leave the store.
Good for you. Good for you. Okay. Well, I don't think I've ever used one of those self-service checkout stations where I don't ring the alarm. Something goes wrong and they've got to come over and help me. I can never get through it by myself. We'll be right back. Captain John Regan, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. We're at the news tab. John, what's the next topic?
Well, I've got a couple of articles here that I'm including just so you are aware of these things. We learn certain things when we go through school, and then along comes something else that upsets that apple cart. And one of those is a unique conductor. And somewhere along the lines, we learn how, certain metals are good conductors, and when they're good conductors, they also, conduct heat as well as electricity. And you can accidentally hold them too close to a heat source, and your hand will tell you pretty quickly that that's something you shouldn't have done. Well, they have now found a metal that conducts electricity but not heat. And you think, well, what's we don't even know where they're going to go with this, but if they're able to include this in things like computers, now one of the problems you have is the just huge amount of heat that some of these computers produce, perhaps can no longer be an issue.
And that's one of the problems is removing the heat from the processors. And class, if you ever open up a central processing unit from a computer, you'll find that the processor itself, the package that it's in, might be the size of a silver dollar. It's square, but may be as thick as a silver dollar and about the same surface area. But the actual processor itself is many, many, many times smaller than that. About the size, if you were to type the letter 0 on a piece of paper, that's about the size of the processor itself. And it's put in a package that allows connections, and they're tiny, tiny gold wires that come out of the processor that go to these pins that are in the package of the central processing unit, the CPU. So we can actually handle it and connect to it, because machines make these, we can't make these. And removing the heat is a real problem, because there's so much activity going on. All those electrons moving generate heat, and you'll see a heat sink in a computer, and the heat sink is usually huge. Some of them are even liquid cooled now, because there's so much heat that has to be removed from all the activity in these processors. And it seemed to me that we were fighting two fronts, John. One, we're pretty much at the limit of making the traces in these integrated circuits so small that we can't really make them much smaller. And two, that's one problem. And the other problem is removing the heat from them. And it sounds like we're on the verge of being able to solve that problem. Now, of course, I'm sure that the government will find great ways of using this technology to further track our movements and thoughts.
Well, the next one is even stranger. New form of matter. And scientists have come up with what they call time crystals. And kind of the way they describe it, if crystals have an atomic structure that repeats in space, and they're using, a carbon lattice like a diamond, why can't crystals also have a structure that repeats in time? And apparently they have found this. And when I saw this article, I'm going, man, that sounds hokey to me. So I went back and checked, does this information come out of the source they claim it does? And it does. So we don't know where this is going. They have no idea an application for this. But if you're, again, thinking about your schooling, there's 4 states of matter. Well, you have to add a 5th one now.
Well, I'm at a loss for this one.
Yeah, like I said, I just want to make you aware of it. I can't even imagine where they're going with this, but I'm seeing several of these types of articles. In fact, we talked about one last week on graphene, about using,
yes,
to make all kinds of things, because it's much stronger than steel. You can make it very thin. And I've got an article, remember graphene, and they actually do have a way of mass producing this, apparently, making it out of old cooking oil. So whatever they're planning on doing with that, and like I say, there's interesting practical applications, including bendable screens. Imagine folding up your phone, putting it in your pocket, and having a screen large enough when you unfold it, you can actually read it instead of text that's pretty small. But again, I try to look what else can they do with this? How do they weaponize it and use it against us? And actually, sadly, there's a lot of application for that.
I'm looking forward to our discussion about Fukushima. It wiped the smile right off my face, John.
Yeah, I had actually 10 articles that I clipped this past week on Fukushima. Some of them have a little bit of a crossover. I just selected this one to be somewhat representative, and it's so disgusting what's going on. They have found where the core of reactor 2 has, gone through the containment vessel, and this the amount of radiation that they're finding is just astronomical. One of the articles I'm looking at that I didn't post, radiation levels up to 530 sieverts per hour. That's not millisieverts. That's sieverts. And that's enough to basically kill you with just a very short exposure, and literally in a matter of seconds. And we don't have the technology to go in and clean this up. It's continuing to put more radiation into the Pacific. Imagine there's more radiation into the air that's coming across on the jet stream, and it's undercovered in the media. It was December 14th of 2015 that I made a post where they had recently declassified, and this was just for official use only, which, like I said, you don't even lock up. The base phone book is for official use only. The weekly reports that were done, and the link that I had was for the first approximately 6 weeks or so after the event. And they knew the first week that most of the radiation in the spent fuel pools had been released to the atmosphere. And neither Barry or Hillary bothered to tell anybody about that. So if you wanted to do anything to help protect yourself, so sorry.
John, I stand by what I said the day after it happened. I went on the radio and I said, Fukushima is the worst man-made disaster since Noah's flood. People laughed at me. John Lee, let me just read this. The article on the conservative Daily Post, you can find it at thefinancialstateoftheunion.com on the news tab, John Reagan's website. It says, when Dr. Chris Busby said that the Fukushima disaster was the worst disaster in the history of mankind, he was not being an alarmist or otherwise exaggerating. The disaster of March 11th, 2011, saw no less than 4 nuclear reactors either melt down, where toxic nuclear fuel turns molten, and unstoppable by man or machine, melt through, where molten fuel drools out of the containment vessel, poisoning the land, and melts out where the core of the reactor explodes out into the world, in this case, as far away as Tokyo. It goes on to say, wildlife, like birds, carry the radiation from the plant to the city on their wings, as do insects. They die and or get into the food supply and remain radioactive and deadly within people forever once inside their bodies. There is no known way to remove such small isotopes from the body. And we know this, and we've reported this over the years, like the Hanford Reservation, the Hanford plant in Washington State, United States, where we dumped radioactive waste in the construction of the weapons we released on Japan. We'll be right back, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. In my opinion, the number one project for President Donald Trump is to arrest the radioactive leaks from Fukushima. That's the number one project. And once the technology is figured out, which we don't have the technology to arrest these leaks, is to arrest the leaks at all the other nuclear plants. Then the step after that is to shut down all the nuclear reactors in the United States, and then tell the rest of the world to follow our lead, or else, because the planet is at risk. We talked about the Hanford site. It's a mostly decommissioned nuclear complex that was operated by the United States. And this is from Wikipedia. And it's in the state of Washington, as I mentioned. The site has been known by many names, including Hanford Project, Hanford Works, Hanford Engineer Works, and Hanford Reservation. It was established in 1943 to produce radioactive materials to be used in the bombing of Japan, which we did. Since then, we have contaminated, our government has contaminated 25 million cubic feet of, they've produced 25 million cubic feet of solid radioactive waste and 200 square miles of contaminated groundwater beneath the site. So they stored radioactive materials there. The containers that they were in leaked. The animals fed on the grasses that grew there, and the radioactive waste spread outward. It's reached the Columbia River. It has gone downstream. And to this day, and for the last maybe 30 years, Mrs. Finelli reads the labels where apples are packaged and will not buy apples from Washington State. With my approval, of course. I mean, I approve of what she's doing. She's right. What a mess, John. There's no fixing Fukushima, the worst man-made disaster since Noah's flood. There's no fixing it. We don't have robots that can sustain the radiation long enough to be operational to do anything at that location. No one has survived it. You think you can be a hero and go in and do something? You'll die. John, any comments?
And let me just share a couple of more articles. These are from E&E News. This one's from yesterday, February 5th. TV reporter, whoa, dead whales. There's a record high number of deaths in Hawaii. Carcasses are scattered throughout islands in the Pacific. Sick and starving animals, a mystery to experts. This one was from January 12th. Massive die-off of sea creatures from California to Alaska. Animals starving as food chains continue to collapse. The scientists, quote, felt like I was doing nothing but counting dead animals.
It's heartbreaking. It's gut-wrenching. And I'm looking at an image on the Conservative Daily Post that you've linked to of a fish. The teeth are malformed. The jaw's malformed. This fish is bleeding. And underneath it says, this is the food that is allowed into America to be eaten. Americans eat this every day. And did Barry and the bandits, did they tell us that this was happening? What's the answer to that, John?
Absolutely not.
An intergalactic disgrace. Barry the bandit, Barry the golfer, Barry the corrupt. I can't really say enough negative things about Barry. He's an absolute disgusting individual. And he led us to this point and didn't protect us. CEO Barry, I'm so glad he's out of the picture. And we've got someone at the helm that is paying attention. Captain John Regan, thank you so much for being with us today.